Arab millionaire CEO falls in love with a secretary on a blind date. She mistakes the magnate for her match and starts a casual and charming conversation. Intrigued by her spontaneity, he decides to hide his true identity. Sarah Bennett hurried through the bustling streets of Manhattan, her heels clicking against the pavement, as she checked her watch for the 100th time. Being late for a blind date wasn't exactly the best first impression, but a last-minute meeting at Morgan & Stanley Marketing had kept her longer than expected. As the dedicated secretary of the company's creative department, she took pride in her work ethic, even if it sometimes complicated her personal life. The restaurant, an elegant establishment in Upper East Side, loomed ahead. Sarah paused to catch her breath and check her appearance in a storefront window. Her friend Jessica's description of her date echoed in her mind. Look for a tall man in a white shirt, dark hair, sitting alone. Simple enough, she thought, smoothing down her navy blue dress. Inside the restaurant, the maître d' greeted her with a practiced smile. "Do you have a reservation, miss?" "I'm meeting someone," Sarah replied, scanning the dining room. Her eyes landed on a striking figure seated alone at a corner table. Dark hair, crisp white shirt, exactly as Jessica had described. Without waiting for the maître d', she made her way to the table. "I'm so sorry I'm late," she said, sliding into the chair across from him. "Work was absolutely crazy today." The man looked up from his phone, and Sarah's breath caught in her throat. He was devastatingly handsome, with deep brown eyes and chiseled features that belonged on a magazine cover. His white shirt, which she had noticed from across the room, was clearly designer, perfectly tailored to his broad shoulders. "Please have a seat," he said, his voice carrying a slight accent that she couldn't quite place. A hint of amusement played at the corners of his mouth. Sarah launched into conversation, determined to make up for her tardiness. "Jessica told me you work in finance, but she didn't mention much else. I have to admit, I was a bit nervous about a blind date, but she insisted you were different from her usual setups." The man's eyebrows rose slightly, but he merely nodded, watching her with increasing interest as she continued to chat. There was something magnetic about his presence, an air of quiet authority that both intimidated and intrigued her. "I hope you don't mind, but I took the liberty of ordering some wine," he said, gesturing to the bottle of what appeared to be an extremely expensive vintage. "That's very thoughtful," Sarah replied, trying to hide her surprise at the choice. Jessica hadn't mentioned that her date was quite so sophisticated. As they talked, Sarah found herself increasingly drawn to his mysterious demeanor. He asked thoughtful questions about her work and life, listening intently to her answers, while revealing very little about himself. The conversation flowed easily, and Sarah began to think that maybe blind dates weren't so bad after all. Then came the moment that changed everything. A waiter approached their table carrying what appeared to be a small cake decorated with candles. Behind him trotted an immaculately groomed golden retriever wearing a party hat. "Happy birthday, Sultan," the waiter announced cheerfully, placing the cake on the table. Sarah froze, her wineglass halfway to her lips. "I'm sorry, what's happening?" "Ah, yes," the man said, his eyes twinkling with undisguised amusement. "This is Sultan, my dog. Today is his 3rd birthday. I'm celebrating with him before my assistant arrives." The realization hit Sarah like a bucket of ice water. This wasn't her blind date. This sophisticated, handsome man was just someone who happened to be wearing a white shirt, sitting alone waiting for his assistant to celebrate his dog's birthday. "Oh my God," she whispered, her face burning with embarrassment. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I thought..." Jessica said, "I'm supposed to be meeting someone else for a blind date, and you matched the description, and I just assumed..." The man's laugh was rich and warm, without a trace of mockery. "Please don't apologize. This has been the most entertaining start to Sultan's birthday party I could have imagined." But Sarah was already gathering her things, her cheeks flaming red. "I should go. I'm so sorry for interrupting your evening. And happy birthday, Sultan," she added, managing a weak smile at the dog who wagged his tail happily. "Wait," the man called after her, but Sarah was already weaving through the tables, desperate to escape. She barely registered the confused look on the maître d's face as she rushed past him and out into the cool evening air. Once outside, she leaned against the building's wall, closing her eyes and taking deep breaths. Her phone buzzed, a text from Jessica. "So sorry. Mark had an emergency and couldn't make it. Just got his message. Hope you weren't waiting long. Sarah groaned, sliding her phone back into her purse. At least she would never have to see that handsome stranger again. She could file this mortifying experience away as just another dating disaster story to laugh about someday. Far, far in the future. Little did she know, fate had other plans, and this was just the beginning of a story that would change her life forever. Monday morning arrived with its usual flurry of activity at Morgan & Stanley Marketing. Sarah sat at her desk, reviewing the week's schedule when Jessica appeared, perching on the edge of her desk. "You still haven't told me what happened Friday night," Jessica prodded, lowering her voice. "Did you at least get to the restaurant before you got my text?" Sarah groaned, burying her face in her hands. "Oh, I got there all right, and managed to make a complete fool of myself in the process." She launched into the story of her mortifying encounter with the mysterious man and his birthday-celebrating dog. "You didn't," Jessica gasped, trying to suppress her laughter. "Well, at least he was nice about it. And hey, how often do you get to crash a dog's birthday party?" Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden buzz of excitement rippling through the office. Linda from HR rushed past, frantically straightening her blazer. "Everyone to the conference room now," she announced. "The new CEO is here for the morning meeting. This is not a drill, people." Sarah's stomach dropped. The company had been abuzz for weeks about the arrival of their new chief executive, some hotshot from overseas who was taking over the US branch. She quickly grabbed her tablet and followed the stream of employees filing into the conference room. As she settled into a seat near the back, Sarah noticed an unusual tension in the air. The corporate higher-ups lined the front row, looking unusually nervous. Then the door opened, and Sarah's world tilted on its axis. Walking into the room, impeccable in a charcoal grey suit, was the man from the restaurant, the dog's birthday party man, the one she had mistaken for her blind date and embarrassed herself in front of just 3 days ago. "Good morning, everyone," he said, his familiar accented voice carrying effortlessly through the room. "I am Karim Al-Rahman, and I'm honored to be joining Morgan & Stanley Marketing as your new CEO." Sarah slid down in her chair, praying for the floor to open up and swallow her whole. Of all the marketing firms in New York, of all the CEOs in the world, how was this even possible? Karim began outlining his vision for the company's future, his presence commanding attention from everyone in the room. Everyone except Sarah, who was too busy trying to become invisible while simultaneously processing this nightmare scenario. "We need fresh perspectives," Karim was saying, his eyes scanning the room. "People who aren't afraid to take initiative, who bring authenticity and creativity to everything they do." His gaze swept past her location, and for a heart-stopping moment, Sarah thought she saw a flicker of recognition, the ghost of a smile touching his lips. But he continued speaking without pause, moving on to discuss quarterly projections. After the meeting, Sarah practically sprinted back to her desk, hoping to avoid any potential encounters. She had almost made it when Linda from HR appeared at her side. "Sarah, Mr. Al-Rahman's office needs the creative department's quarterly reports right away. Could you take them up?" Sarah stared at her in horror. "Couldn't we just email them?" "He specifically requested hard copies," Linda said, already shuffling through a stack of folders. "Here they are. His office is on the top floor." Minutes later, Sarah stood in the elevator, clutching the folders like a shield. The ride to the top floor felt like an eternity, each floor bringing her closer to what would surely be another mortifying encounter. The elevator doors opened directly into a sleek reception area, where an elegant woman sat behind a massive desk. "Can I help you?" "I have the quarterly reports for Mr. Al-Rahman," Sarah managed to say, her voice surprisingly steady. "Oh, perfect timing. He just finished his call. Go right in." Before Sarah could protest, the assistant was already opening the heavy wooden door to the CEO's office. Sarah had no choice but to walk through. Karim stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, his back to the door as he gazed out over the city. At the sound of her entrance, he turned, and Sarah watched as recognition dawned on his face. "Ah," he said, that same amused smile playing at his lips. "I was wondering when our paths would cross again. Though I must say, this time you're exactly where you're supposed to be." Sarah forced herself to maintain eye contact, determined to handle this professionally. "Mr. Al-Rahman, I have the quarterly reports you requested, and I would like to formally apologize for Friday night's..." Misunderstanding. Please, he said, moving to his desk. Call me Karim, and there's no need for apologies. Sultan quite enjoyed having an unexpected guest at his party. He paused, studying her with those intense eyes. Though I am curious, did you ever find your actual blind date? No, Sarah admitted, feeling her cheeks warm. He cancelled at the last minute. His loss then, Karim said simply. He accepted the folders from her, their fingers brushing briefly in the exchange. Thank you for these, Miss Bennett. Sarah Bennett. Miss Bennett. He tested the name, and something in his tone made Sarah's pulse quicken. I have a feeling we'll be seeing much more of each other. As Sarah left his office, she couldn't shake the feeling that her life was about to become much more complicated. She just had no idea how right she was. 2 weeks after the conference room revelation, Sarah found herself settling into a new routine. She had managed to avoid any direct interactions with Karim, communicating strictly through emails and his assistant. However, fate had other plans. One particularly hectic Thursday morning, Sarah stepped into the elevator, absorbed in reviewing documents on her tablet. Just as the doors were closing, a hand caught them, and Karim stepped in. Sarah's heart skipped a beat as she noticed they were alone. "Good morning, Miss Bennett," he said, pressing the button for the top floor. "I trust you're not planning to crash any birthday parties today?" Sarah couldn't help but smile despite her nervousness. "No, sir. I've learned my lesson about making assumptions based on white shirts." "Pity," he replied, his eyes twinkling. "Sultan has been asking about you." Before Sarah could respond, the elevator shuddered to a halt, the lights flickering momentarily before stabilizing. They were stuck between floors. "Well," Karim said, loosening his tie slightly, "it seems we have some time to talk. Tell me, Miss Bennett, how long have you been with Morgan and Stanley?" 5 years, Sarah replied, trying to maintain her composure despite their close proximity in the confined space. "I started as an intern in the creative department. And now you're their secretary," he observed. "But I've been reviewing your file. You have an MBA from Columbia, top of your class. Why aren't you in a management position?" Sarah shifted uncomfortably. "I've applied for several promotions, but there were always other candidates with more experience. Or perhaps," Karim said, his voice taking on a serious tone, "the previous management failed to recognize potential when they saw it." The elevator hummed back to life, continuing its journey upward. As they reached the top floor, Karim turned to her. "Come to my office. There's something we need to discuss." Sarah followed him, her mind racing with possibilities. In his office, Karim didn't sit behind his desk, but instead gestured for her to join him in the sitting area by the windows. "I'm making some changes to the executive structure," he began, "starting with my immediate team. My current personal assistant is returning to Dubai next month, and I need someone who understands both this company and this city." He paused, studying her reaction. "I want you for the position." Sarah blinked in surprise. "Me? But I don't have any experience as an executive assistant." "You have exactly what I need: intelligence, adaptability, and an authentic approach to challenges. I've seen your work, Sarah. You don't just complete tasks, you improve processes. That's rare." "This is unexpected," Sarah managed to say. "Like showing up at a dog's birthday party." Karim's smile was warm. "Sometimes the best opportunities come from unexpected places. The position includes a significant salary increase, direct involvement in executive decisions, and travel opportunities. You'll be my right hand in running this branch." Sarah's mind was spinning with the possibilities, but also with concerns. "What about the rumors? People already gossip about us because of the restaurant incident." "Let them gossip," Karim said dismissively. "I don't make business decisions based on office politics. I need someone I can trust, someone who isn't afraid to speak their mind." He leaned forward slightly. "Someone who can walk into a situation with confidence, even if it turns out to be the wrong table." Sarah couldn't help but laugh. "You're never going to let me forget that, are you?" "Never," he agreed, his eyes crinkling with amusement. "So, what do you say?" Sarah took a deep breath. "When do I start?" "Immediately. Your first task will be helping me prepare for next week's charity gala. The company's biggest clients and partners will be there, including my family's representatives." He hesitated for a moment. "And my ex-fiancée." Sarah's eyebrows rose. "Ex-fiancée?" "Amira Al-Sayed. Our families arranged the engagement, but we ended it 6 months ago. She's still adjusting to that reality. Karim stood, walking to his desk. The event details are in this folder. Take today to review everything and wrap up your current projects. You'll start officially on Monday. As Sarah left his office, clutching the folder, she felt both excited and apprehensive. This promotion would change everything: her career, her daily routine, her relationship with Karim. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this decision than just professional considerations. Back at her desk, Sarah opened the gala folder and found an elegant invitation on top. As she read through the details, her phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "Emergency lunch meeting needed. Heard you were in the big boss's office for ages. Spill everything." Sarah smiled, gathering her things for lunch. She had a feeling this was just the beginning of a much bigger story, one that would challenge everything she thought she knew about herself, her career, and the mysterious man who had just changed her life with a job offer. Little did she know that the charity gala would be more than just her first assignment. It would be the event that would set in motion a chain of events that would transform both their lives forever. Sarah's first week as Karim's executive assistant proved to be a whirlwind of activity. Between mastering new responsibilities and coordinating the upcoming gala, she barely had time to breathe. Yet she couldn't deny the thrill of working directly with him, even if his presence still made her heart race. Friday afternoon found them in his office, reviewing the final gala arrangements. Sarah sat across from Karim's desk, going through her tablet checklist. The venue is confirmed, catering is set, and the guest list is finalized at 300 attendees, she reported. The Al Sayed family confirmed their attendance this morning. Karim's jaw tightened slightly at the mention of his ex-fiancée's family. "And the seating arrangements?" "I've placed the Al Sayeds at table 12, far from your table," Sarah said, noting his reaction, "though I can't guarantee Amira won't find her way to you during the evening." "Clever," he said, offering a small smile. "You're proving to be quite perceptive, Miss Bennett." "Sarah," she corrected gently. "If we're working this closely together, you might as well use my first name." "Sarah," he repeated, the way he said it making her name sound like something precious. "Then there's something else we need to discuss." He stood, moving to the window with his hands clasped behind his back. "I have a favor to ask, one that goes beyond your professional duties." Sarah's pulse quickened. "What kind of favor?" "I need you to attend the gala as my date," he said, turning to face her. "Not as my assistant, but as my companion for the evening." Sarah stared at him, certain she had misheard. "Your date? But why?" "Amira's presence complicates things," he explained, running a hand through his dark hair. "She's been persistent since our broken engagement, trying to convince both our families that we should reconcile. Having you by my side would send a clear message that I've moved on. So you want me to pretend to be your girlfriend?" Sarah clarified, trying to ignore the flutter in her stomach. "Just for one evening," he assured her. "You're intelligent, capable, and already familiar with all the key players who will be attending. It makes perfect sense. Except for the part where I have nothing suitable to wear to such an event," Sarah pointed out. A smile played at the corners of his mouth. "That's already taken care of." He pressed a button on his desk phone. "Send them in, please." The office door opened, and 2 women entered, rolling in a rack of designer gowns. Sarah's eyes widened as she recognized labels that cost more than her monthly salary. "Choose whatever you like," Karim said. "Consider it a signing bonus for taking the position." Sarah stood, running her fingers along the luxurious fabrics. "This is too much." "It's necessary," he countered. "If you're going to play the part of a CEO's girlfriend, you need to look it." He paused, watching her examine a midnight blue gown. "Besides, I have a reputation for spoiling those close to me. Just ask Sultan." Sarah laughed, remembering the elaborate birthday party. "Does he always get custom-made cakes?" "Only on special occasions," Karim replied, his eyes twinkling. "Speaking of which, he asks about you occasionally. Perhaps you could visit him sometime." Sarah's heart skipped a beat at the casual invitation to his home. "I'd like that," she said softly. They held each other's gaze for a moment too long before Karim cleared his throat. "Try the dresses on. We'll need time for any alterations before the gala." An hour later, Sarah stood before a mirror in Karim's private bathroom, wearing a stunning emerald green gown that fit her like a glove. The silk chiffon floated around her legs, while the fitted bodice highlighted her figure perfectly. "This one," she called out. "It's perfect." When she emerged from the bathroom, Karim's expression made her breath catch. He looked at her with such intensity that she felt her cheeks flush. "Yes," he agreed, his voice slightly hoarse. "That's the one." The moment was interrupted by a knock at the door. Karim's afternoon appointments had arrived. "I should go change," Sarah said quickly, retreating to the bathroom. When she returned in her work clothes, Karim was reviewing documents at his desk. "The car will pick you up at 7 tomorrow evening," he said, not looking up. "Try to get some rest tonight. Tomorrow will be interesting." As Sarah gathered her things to leave, she paused at the door. "Karim." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "Thank you. For the dress, for trusting me with this. Thank you for agreeing," he replied softly. "And Sarah, that color suits you perfectly." Back at her apartment that evening, Sarah hung the gown carefully in her closet. As she got ready for bed, she couldn't help but wonder what she was getting herself into. Pretending to be Karim's girlfriend was dangerous territory, especially given how she was already struggling to maintain professional boundaries with him. Her phone buzzed with a text from him. "Don't forget your dancing shoes tomorrow. A CEO's girlfriend should know how to waltz." Sarah groaned, falling back onto her bed. She had forgotten about the dancing. As she drifted off to sleep, her dreams were filled with swirling emerald silk and the feeling of strong arms around her waist guiding her across a ballroom floor. Tomorrow would indeed be interesting, but Sarah had no idea just how much this one evening would change everything between them. The limousine glided to a stop in front of the opulent Waldorf Astoria, where the charity gala was being held. Sarah took a deep breath, smoothing down her emerald gown. Karim, looking dashing in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, gave her a reassuring smile. "Ready?" he asked, his hand resting lightly on the door handle. Sarah nodded, trying to calm her nerves. "As I'll ever be." The moment they stepped onto the red carpet, flashbulbs erupted. Karim placed his hand on the small of Sarah's back, guiding her through the sea of photographers and curious onlookers. She could hear the whispers already starting. "Who's that with Karim al-Rahman?" Inside the grand ballroom, the atmosphere was electric. Soft jazz played as New York's elite mingled, champagne flutes in hand. Sarah recognized faces from magazine covers and boardrooms, feeling slightly overwhelmed by the company she now kept. "Deep breaths," Karim murmured close to her ear, his hand still resting protectively on her back. "You belong here just as much as anyone else." His words bolstered her confidence, and Sarah straightened her shoulders. She could do this. She was here not just as Karim's date, but as a capable professional in her own right. As they made their way through the crowd, Sarah was surprised by how many people Karim introduced her to, not as his assistant, but simply as Sarah Bennett. Each time his hand would linger on her waist, his smile warm as he spoke about her accomplishments at the company. It felt natural, as if they'd been a couple for years, rather than colleagues playing a part. "Karim!" a voice called out, and Sarah turned to see a striking woman approaching them. Her designer gown and flawless makeup screamed old money, but there was a sharpness in her eyes that set Sarah on edge. "Amira," Karim greeted, his tone polite but cool. "I'm glad you could make it." Amira's gaze flicked to Sarah, a perfectly arched eyebrow raising slightly. "And who is this?" "This is Sarah Bennett," Karim said, his arm tightening slightly around Sarah's waist. "My girlfriend." The word sent a shiver down Sarah's spine, even though she knew it was just for show. "Girlfriend," Amira repeated, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "How unexpected. I wasn't aware you were seeing anyone, Karim." "It's a relatively new development," Karim replied smoothly. "But when you know, you know." Sarah felt her cheeks flush at the implication in his words. She extended her hand to Amira, determined to play her part convincingly. "It's lovely to meet you, Amira. Karim has told me so much about you." Amira's handshake was brief and cool. "Funny, he's never mentioned you before." She turned back to Karim. "Your father was asking about you earlier. You should go say hello." "Of course," Karim nodded. "If you'll excuse us." As they walked away, Sarah could feel Amira's eyes boring into her back. "I think I just made an enemy," she whispered to Karim. "You held your own beautifully," he assured her, Amira isn't used to not getting her way. It's good for her to see that I've moved on. They spent the next hour mingling with various business associates and philanthropists. Sarah was impressed by Karim's ability to navigate the complex social waters, always keeping her involved in the conversations. She found herself genuinely enjoying the evening, almost forgetting that their relationship was just a charade. As the band struck up a waltz, Karim turned to her with a mischievous glint in his eye. "Shall we put those dancing shoes to use?" Sarah hesitated. "I'm not sure I remember all the steps." "Trust me," he said, leading her onto the dance floor. "I won't let you fall." As Karim pulled her close, Sarah's breath caught in her throat. One of his hands rested on her waist, the other clasping hers gently. She placed her free hand on his shoulder, acutely aware of how solid and warm he felt beneath her touch. "Just follow my lead," he murmured, and then they were moving. To Sarah's surprise, the steps came back to her easily. Karim was an excellent dancer, guiding her effortlessly across the floor. As they twirled and glided, the rest of the room seemed to fade away. All she could focus on was the warmth of his hand on her waist, the intensity in his dark eyes as he gazed down at her. "You're a natural," Karim said softly, pulling her a fraction closer. "I have a good partner," Sarah replied, her voice barely above a whisper. For a moment, the pretense fell away. This wasn't about convincing others or playing a role. It was just the two of them, moving together in perfect harmony. As the music faded, they remained in each other's arms for a beat longer than necessary. Sarah's heart was racing, and not from the exertion of the dance. "Karim," she began, not sure what she was going to say, but feeling like she needed to say something. But before she could continue, a commotion near the entrance caught their attention. A group of reporters had somehow made their way into the ballroom, cameras flashing as they approached Karim and Sarah. "Mr. Al-Rahman, is it true you're dating your assistant?" one shouted. "How long has this been going on?" another called out. Karim's arm tightened protectively around Sarah as security moved to intercept the reporters. "We should go," he said quietly. "Are you ready to leave?" Sarah nodded, suddenly feeling overwhelmed. As Karim guided her towards a side exit, she caught sight of Amira watching them with a calculated expression. Something told Sarah that this was just the beginning of their troubles. In the safety of the limousine, Sarah let out a shaky breath. What just happened? Karim ran a hand through his hair, looking troubled. "I'm not sure, but I intend to find out. I'm sorry you got caught up in this, Sarah." "It's okay," she assured him, surprised to find that she meant it. "We knew there might be some attention." As the car wound its way through the city streets, Sarah found herself thinking about the evening, the dancing, the way Karim had looked at her, the feeling of rightness when he called her his girlfriend. It was becoming increasingly difficult to separate the act from her genuine feelings. Little did she know, Karim was having similar thoughts, stealing glances at her as she gazed out the window. The line between pretense and reality was blurring, and neither of them was sure how to navigate these new, uncharted waters. The Monday following the gala, Sarah arrived at the office to find it buzzing with barely contained excitement. As she made her way to her desk, she caught snippets of hushed conversations and noticed several colleagues giving her curious looks. Jessica intercepted her before she could reach the elevator. "Sarah Bennett," she hissed, pulling her friend into a quiet corner. "Why didn't you tell me you were dating Karim Al-Rahman?" Sarah's stomach dropped. "What are you talking about?" Jessica thrust her phone into Sarah's hands. On the screen was a gossip website featuring photos from the gala. There she was, in her emerald gown, dancing with Karim. The headline blared, "Marketing mogul's secret romance with assistant." "It's not what it looks like," Sarah began, but Jessica cut her off. "Not what it looks like? Sarah, you're practically glowing in his arms, and look at the way he's looking at you. That's not just a boss-employee relationship." Sarah handed the phone back, her mind racing. "It's complicated, Jess. I can't really explain right now, but we're not... The elevator dinged and Karim stepped out, his expression unreadable as he scanned the lobby. His eyes locked with Sarah's, and he gave a slight nod towards his office. "I have to go," Sarah told Jessica. "We'll talk later, I promise." In Karim's office, Sarah found him pacing by the windows. "Close the door," he said without preamble. As soon as she did, Karim turned to her, his face a mix of concern and frustration. "I've been on damage control all morning. The board is not happy about these rumors. I'm so sorry, Sarah said, feeling a pang of guilt. This is all my fault. If I hadn't agreed to pretend... No, Karim cut her off firmly. This is not your fault. If anything, I'm the one who put you in this position. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. The question now is how we handle this. Sarah squared her shoulders. What do you need me to do? Karim studied her for a moment, his expression softening. You're remarkable, you know that? Most people would be panicking right now. Oh, I'm panicking, Sarah assured him with a wry smile. I'm just very good at hiding it. He chuckled, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. All right, here's the plan. For now, we neither confirm nor deny the rumors. We focus on work and show everyone that whatever is or isn't happening between us doesn't affect our professional performance. Sarah nodded, relieved to have a clear course of action. I can do that. There's one more thing, Karim added, his tone becoming serious again. The board wants to meet with both of us this afternoon. They're concerned about potential conflicts of interest. Sarah felt a flutter of anxiety. Do you think my job is in danger? No, Karim said firmly. I won't let that happen. You're too valuable to this company. He paused, then added softly, and to me. The weight of his words hung in the air between them. Sarah's heart raced as she met his gaze, seeing something there that went beyond mere professional appreciation. The moment was broken by a knock at the door. Karim's assistant poked her head in. Mr. Al-Rahman, your 10 o'clock is here. Thank you, Karim said, straightening his tie. Sarah, we'll reconvene before the board meeting. Until then, business as usual. As Sarah left his office, she couldn't shake the feeling that business as usual was becoming increasingly impossible where Karim was concerned. The day passed in a blur of meetings and barely contained office gossip. Sarah threw herself into her work, determined to prove her worth beyond any supposed romantic entanglements. By the time the board meeting arrived, she felt prepared to face whatever questions they might have. Karim met her outside the conference room, his hand briefly touching her elbow in a gesture of support. Ready? Sarah took a deep breath. As I'll ever be. Inside, the board members sat around a long table, their expressions varying from curiosity to outright disapproval. Sarah recognized several faces from the gala, including Amira's father, who regarded her with thinly veiled suspicion. Mr. Al-Rahman, Miss Bennett, the board chairman began. I'm sure you understand why we've called this meeting. The rumors circulating about your current relationship have raised concerns about the company's image and potential conflicts of interest. Karim stepped forward, his voice steady and authoritative. I assure you, there is no conflict of interest. Miss Bennett's promotion to executive assistant was based solely on her qualifications and exemplary work performance. Any personal relationship, real or perceived, has no bearing on our professional conduct. And yet, Amira's father interjected, you chose to bring her as your date to a high-profile event, knowing it would attract attention. Sarah felt a surge of indignation. Before Karim could respond, she found herself speaking up. If I may, sir, my presence at the gala was in a professional capacity. As Mr. Al-Rahman's executive assistant, it's my job to support him at such events. The nature of our relationship has been grossly exaggerated by the media. The room fell silent, all eyes on Sarah. She held her ground, meeting each board member's gaze with quiet confidence. After a moment, the chairman spoke again. Be that as it may, we need to address this situation before it affects our stock prices or client relationships. Mr. Al-Rahman, we suggest issuing a statement clarifying Miss Bennett's role in the company and denying any romantic involvement. Karim tensed beside Sarah. She could sense his reluctance even as he nodded in agreement. Of course. We'll draft a statement immediately. As they left the meeting, Sarah felt a mix of relief and an unexpected sadness. They had weathered the storm, but at what cost? The idea of publicly denying any feelings between them, even if it was the sensible thing to do, left her with a hollow feeling in her chest. In the privacy of Karim's office, he turned to her, his expression conflicted. Sarah, It's okay, she interrupted, forcing a smile. We did what we had to do. It's better this way, right? Clear boundaries, no complications. Karim studied her face, seeming to search for something. Finally, he nodded. Right? No complications. But as Sarah returned to her desk, she couldn't shake the feeling that things were already far more complicated than either of them wanted to admit. The line between pretense and reality had blurred, and she was no longer sure which side she was standing on. In the weeks following the board meeting, Sarah and Karim fell into a new rhythm. On the surface, everything was professional, their interactions carefully measured under the watchful eyes of their colleagues. The official statement had been released, quashing the rumors of a romantic relationship. Yet beneath the calm exterior, an undercurrent of tension simmered. It was in the little moments, lingering glances across the conference room, the brush of fingers as they exchanged documents, the way Karim's voice softened when they were alone. Sarah found herself hyper-aware of his presence, her heart racing every time he stood close. One evening, as they worked late on a crucial presentation, Sarah noticed Karim rubbing his temples, fatigue etched on his face. "You should take a break," she said gently. "You've been staring at those figures for hours." Karim leaned back in his chair, offering her a tired smile. "You're right, as usual. What would I do without you?" "Probably work yourself into an early grave," Sarah teased, standing to stretch. "Come on, let's get some air." To her surprise, Karim agreed. They made their way to the rooftop terrace, a space usually reserved for corporate events but quiet and empty at this late hour. The New York skyline glittered before them, a tapestry of lights against the night sky. "It's beautiful up here," Sarah breathed, leaning against the railing. Karim stood beside her, their shoulders almost touching. "It is. Sometimes I forget to look up and appreciate it." They fell into a comfortable silence, the cool night air refreshing after hours cooped up in the office. Sarah glanced at Karim, admiring his profile as he gazed out at the city. In this moment, away from the pressures of the office, he seemed more relaxed, more human. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah ventured. Karim turned to her, his expression open. "Of course. Why did you really end things with Amira? I mean, I know you said it was an arranged engagement, but—" Karim was quiet for a long moment, considering his words. "It was more than just the arrangement," he finally said. "Amira she's part of my world, the world I grew up in, a world of expectations and traditions. But I've always wanted more than that. I wanted a partnership based on genuine connection, not family alliances." He turned to face Sarah fully, his eyes intense. "I want someone who sees me for who I am, not what I represent. Someone who challenges me, who makes me laugh, who—" He trailed off, his gaze dropping to Sarah's lips for a brief, heart-stopping moment. Sarah felt herself leaning in, drawn by an invisible force. Karim's hand came up to cup her cheek, his touch feather-light. Time seemed to slow as the distance between them narrowed. Just as their lips were about to meet, the terrace door burst open. They sprang apart as Jessica stumbled through, giggling with a group of colleagues who had clearly been enjoying post-work drinks. "Sarah, there you are," Jessica called out, oblivious to the moment she had interrupted. "We've been looking everywhere for you. Come join us for a nightcap." Sarah glanced at Karim, seeing her own mix of frustration and longing reflected in his eyes. "I should go," she said softly. "We have that early meeting tomorrow." Karim nodded, his professional mask slipping back into place. "Of course, good night, Sarah." As Sarah allowed herself to be pulled away by Jessica, she looked back to see Karim standing alone on the terrace, silhouetted against the city lights. The weight of everything left unsaid hung heavy between them. The next morning, an uneasy tension filled Karim's office as they prepared for their meeting. Neither mentioned the almost kiss, but Sarah could feel Karim's eyes on her as she organized their presentation materials. "Sarah," Karim began, his voice low, "about last night." Before he could continue, there was a knock at the door. Karim's assistant entered, looking flustered. "Mr. Rahman, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but there's an urgent call from Dubai. It's your father." Karim's expression tightened. "I'll take it in here. Sarah, could you—" "I'll reschedule the meeting." Sarah nodded, understanding immediately. As she left the office, she heard Karim answering the phone, his tone clipped and formal. Whatever his father had to say, it didn't sound like good news. Hours later, Karim emerged from his office, looking troubled. He beckoned Sarah to follow him into a private conference room. "What's going on?" Sarah asked, concern evident in her voice. Karim paced the length of the room before turning to face her. "My father is coming to New York. Apparently he's not satisfied with how I'm handling things here. And—" He hesitated, running a hand through his hair. He's bringing Amira with him. Sarah felt her stomach drop. Oh, he wants to revisit the idea of our engagement, Karim continued, frustration clear in his voice. He thinks it would be good for the company, for our families. And what do you think? Sarah asked quietly, dreading the answer. Karim moved closer, his eyes searching hers. I think I can't go through with it. Not when... The air between them crackled with unspoken emotion. Sarah's heart raced as Karim reached out, his fingers brushing her arm. Sarah, The conference room door swung open, startling them both. Linda from HR stood there, a stack of papers in her arms. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize anyone was in here. Karim stepped back, his professional demeanor snapping back into place. It's fine, Linda, we were just finishing up. Sarah, we'll continue this discussion later. As Sarah watched Karim leave, she couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. With his father and Amira on their way, and their own feelings becoming harder to ignore, she knew they were standing on the edge of something that could either bring them together or tear them apart. The question was, were they both ready to take the leap? The next week passed in a whirlwind of preparations for the arrival of Karim's father and Amira. Sarah threw herself into work, organizing meetings and ensuring everything was perfect, all while trying to ignore the growing knot of anxiety in her stomach. She and Karim had barely had a moment alone since their interrupted conversation in the conference room, and the tension between them was palpable. On the morning of their guest's arrival, Sarah found Karim in his office, staring out the window with a pensive expression. "The car is ready to take you to the airport," she said softly, not wanting to startle him. Karim turned, offering her a small smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Thank you, Sarah, for everything." There was a weight to his words that made Sarah's heart ache. She wanted to say something, to address the unspoken things between them, but the moment was interrupted by Karim's phone buzzing with a message from the driver. "I should go," he said, straightening his tie. "Will you be all right handling things here?" Sarah nodded, forcing a cheerful tone. "Of course, don't worry about a thing." As Karim left, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental was about to change. Hours later, Sarah stood in the lobby with other key staff members, awaiting the arrival of their important guests. When the elevator doors opened, Karim emerged, followed by an imposing older man who could only be his father, and the elegantly dressed Amira. "Father Amira, this is Sarah Bennett, my executive assistant," Karim said, making the introductions. Mr. Al-Rahman Sr. regarded Sarah with a calculating gaze. "Ah, yes, the one from the newspapers. I trust those rumors have been thoroughly put to rest?" Sarah felt her cheeks flush but maintained her composure. "Absolutely, sir. It was all a misunderstanding." Amira stepped forward, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Sarah, how lovely to see you again. I do hope we'll have a chance to chat during our visit." The underlying tension was palpable as the group made their way to the conference room for the first of many meetings. Sarah couldn't help but notice how Amira stayed close to Karim, her hand occasionally brushing his arm in a gesture of familiarity. Over the next few days, Sarah found herself increasingly sidelined. Karim was constantly in meetings with his father and the board, or being whisked away to dinners and events with Amira at his side. When she did see him, he seemed distracted and distant. The easy rapport they once shared now strained. One evening, as Sarah was preparing to leave the office, she overheard voices coming from Karim's office. The door was slightly ajar, and she couldn't help but pause when she heard her name mentioned. "So I can't deny that your relationship with this Sarah girl has caused some concern," Mr. Al-Rahman was saying. "The board is worried about potential scandals, and frankly, so am I." "There is no relationship," Karim's voice was firm. "Sarah is an exceptional employee, nothing more." "Good," his father replied. "Then you won't object to her transfer to our London office. It's a promotion, of course, but it would also put an end to any lingering speculation." Sarah's heart dropped. "Transfer? To London?" "I don't think that's necessary," Karim said, a note of tension in his voice. "Sarah's work here is invaluable." "Come now, Karim," Amira's voice chimed in. "Surely you can see this is for the best. With Sarah gone, we can focus on rebuilding our relationship, on the future of our family's alliance." There was a long pause before Karim spoke again. "I'll consider it." Unable to listen anymore, Sarah hurried away, her mind reeling. She made it to the elevator before the tears started to fall. How had everything gone so wrong? The next morning, Sarah steeled herself as she entered Karim's office for their daily briefing. She was determined to confront him about what she'd overheard, to fight for her position and maybe, just maybe, for something more. But as she opened the door, she stopped short. Karim was not alone. Amira was perched on the edge of his desk, leaning in close as they looked at something on his computer screen. They both looked up as Sarah entered, and the guilty expression that flashed across Karim's face told her everything she needed to know. "I'm sorry," Sarah said, her voice surprisingly steady. "I didn't mean to interrupt." "It's fine, Sarah," Karim said, standing quickly. "We were just—" "No need to explain," Sarah cut him off. She placed a folder on his desk. "Here's the report you asked for. If there's nothing else, I have some work to finish." Without waiting for a response, she turned and left the office, her head held high, even as her heart crumbled. Back at her desk, Sarah opened her email and began composing a message to HR. If Karim wouldn't make the decision, she would make it for him. She requested a transfer, citing a desire for new challenges and growth opportunities. As she hit send, Sarah felt a mix of sadness and resolve. She'd come to Morgan & Stanley Marketing to build a career, not to get caught up in a complicated, almost romance with her boss. It was time to remember that, to put herself and her ambitions first. Yet even as she tried to convince herself this was the right decision, Sarah couldn't ignore the ache in her chest. She had fallen for Karim despite her best efforts not to, and leaving meant giving up on the possibility of what they could have been. As the day drew to a close, Sarah gathered her things, unsure if she would have the strength to come back tomorrow and face Karim again. She cast one last glance at his office door, half hoping he would emerge, would stop her, would say all the things they'd left unsaid. But the door remained closed, and Sarah stepped into the elevator alone, the weight of her decisions settling over her like a heavy cloak. As she watched the floor numbers descend, she wondered if she was making the biggest mistake of her life, or saving herself from an even greater heartbreak. Little did she know, behind his closed office door, Karim sat with his head in his hands, torn between duty and desire, tradition and the promise of something new. The choice he would make in the coming days would change both their lives forever. The next morning, Sarah arrived at the office earlier than usual, determined to start packing her things before anyone else arrived. She had spent a sleepless night second-guessing her decision to transfer, but in the light of day, she knew it was the right choice. As she began to sort through her desk drawers, a familiar voice startled her. "Going somewhere?" Sarah looked up to find Karim standing there, his expression a mix of confusion and concern. She hadn't expected him to be in so early. She began, then straightened her shoulders. "I've requested a transfer to the London office." Karim's eyes widened. "What? Why?" "I think we both know why," Sarah said softly. "It's for the best, isn't it? No more rumors, no more complications. You can focus on your family's expectations, and I can focus on my career." Karim ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in his voice. "Sarah, I never agreed to that transfer. I would never make that decision without talking to you first. But you were considering it," she countered. "I heard you, Karim, with your father and Amira." Understanding dawned on his face. "You overheard—" "Sarah, it's not what you think, isn't it?" she asked, unable to keep the hurt from her voice. "I saw you with Amira in your office. It's clear where things are heading." Karim stepped closer, his eyes intense. "Is that what you really think? That after everything we've been through, I would just— What? Go back to Amira, forget about you?" Sarah's resolve began to crumble under the weight of his gaze. "I don't know what to think anymore. All I know is that I can't keep pretending that there's nothing between us while watching you with her." "Then stop pretending," Karim said, his voice low and urgent. "Because I'm done pretending too." Before Sarah could react, Karim closed the distance between them, cupping her face in his hands and kissing her with a passion that took her breath away. For a moment, all the doubts and fears melted away, and Sarah allowed herself to sink into the kiss, her arms wrapping around him. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Karim rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that for so long," he murmured. "What about your father?" "The company? Amira?" Sarah asked, still reeling from the kiss. Karim pulled back slightly, his hands still framing her face. "Last night, after I found out about your transfer request, I realized I was about to lose the best thing that's ever happened to me. I spent hours talking with my father, explaining how I felt, how much you mean to me. It wasn't easy, but he finally understood. And Amira? She knew, I think, before I did. She told me I was a fool if I let you go." Karim smiled ruefully. She wasn't wrong. Sarah's heart soared, but a small seed of doubt remained. What about the company? The board? "I told them the truth," Karim said simply, "that I'm in love with you, and that our relationship has only made me a better leader, a better person. If they can't accept that, then maybe this isn't the right place for either of us." Sarah's breath caught at his words. "You're in love with me?" "Completely and utterly," Karim affirmed, his smile radiant. "Sarah Bennett, you crashed my dog's birthday party and turned my world upside down in the best possible way. How could I not fall in love with you?" Laughing through happy tears, Sarah pulled him close for another kiss. "I love you too, you impossible man." As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, the early morning sunlight streaming through the windows, Sarah knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Karim pulled back slightly, a mischievous glint in his eye. "So, about that transfer request, consider it rescinded," Sarah grinned, "although I wouldn't mind a trip to London sometime. Strictly for pleasure, not business." "I think that can be arranged," Karim chuckled, pulling her close once more. As the office began to come to life around them, Sarah and Karim knew they had a lot to figure out: how to navigate their personal and professional relationships, how to deal with the inevitable gossip, how to blend their different worlds. But in that moment, with the promise of a future together stretching out before them, none of those challenges seemed insurmountable. They had started as strangers at a dog's birthday party, became colleagues, friends, and finally lovers. Their journey had been filled with misunderstandings, near misses, and moments of doubt. But in the end, love had found a way. As they walked hand in hand to face the new day and their new reality, Sarah couldn't help but smile. Sometimes, the greatest love stories begin in the most unexpected places, even at a canine birthday celebration in a fancy restaurant. And as for Sultan, Karim's faithful companion, well, he was more than happy to welcome Sarah into their little family, looking forward to many more birthday parties with both his favorite humans by his side. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope Sarah and Karim's journey has touched your hearts as much as it has touched ours. Their story reminds us that love can bloom in the most unexpected places, overcoming obstacles and bridging different worlds. If you enjoyed this tale of romance and self-discovery, we have a special playlist with equally captivating stories waiting for you. You can find it by clicking the link to your left. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up if you like the story. Every day we bring you unique narratives that explore the complexities of life and love. Stay tuned for our upcoming content. We have many more heartwarming tales to share. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What was your favorite moment in Sarah and Karim's story? Do you have your own tale of unexpected love to share? Join us in the comments section below and let's keep the conversation going. Remember, sometimes the greatest adventures in life and love begin with a simple misunderstanding or a dog's birthday party. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. Until next time, keep believing in the power of love to transform lives and bring people together, no matter where they come from or what challenges they face.